The fluorescent office lights hummed aggressively above Pei's cluttered desk as the clock ticked past midnight. Rows of cold spreadsheets stretched across his dual monitors, filled with numbers that seemed to mock his dwindling youth. He rubbed his bloodshot eyes, feeling the heavy burden of another unpaid weekend shift pressing down on his chest. His tyrannical manager had demanded a complete overhaul of the gaming monetization plan before the morning meeting. Pei reached for his cold cup of black coffee, only to find nothing but a bitter residue left at the bottom. Suddenly, a sharp stabbing pain flared through his chest, forcing him to gasp for air as the room began to spin violently. The digital display of his computer terminal distorted into a blinding vortex of cascading white light. Pei felt himself falling through a weightless void, completely disconnected from his physical body and the office floor. A strange, profound silence enveloped his senses, replacing the stressful ringing of his office phone. A loud electronic bird chirp suddenly echoed directly inside his mind, breaking the absolute quiet. He blinked hard as a wave of warm natural sunlight hit his face, accompanied by the distinct smell of old textbooks and instant noodles. He looked down at his hands, realizing they were completely smooth and devoid of his typical corporate calluses. Standing up quickly, he stumbled over to a dusty mirror hanging on the back of the closet door. Reflected in the glass was his 19-year-old self, dressed in a wrinkled college hoodie he had thrown away a decade ago. A calendar hanging on the wall caught his attention, boldly displaying the year as exactly 10 years in the past. He had somehow traveled back in time to his very first semester of university, completely escaping his bleak corporate future. Before he could celebrate his freedom, a sharp ping sounded in his ears, and a translucent blue rectangle materialized in front of him. Bold text began typing itself onto the hovering interface with a mechanical clicking sound. Pei, read the words aloud, wondering if he was experiencing a vivid hallucination caused by extreme sleep deprivation. The system introduced itself as Richie, a mystical business engine designed to convert corporate energy into material wealth. According to the rules, Pei would be granted a massive initial startup fund specifically meant for commercial investments. However, the system specified a strict condition regarding how his personal wealth would be calculated. If his business venture made a profit, he would only receive a dismal 0.1% of those earnings as personal cash. But if his company legally lost money on a project, every single dollar of that loss would convert into his personal bank account at a 1-to-1 ratio. Pei gasped as he realized the absolute absurdity of the financial system layout. Making a successful game in the current market was incredibly difficult, but making a complete failure was effortlessly simple. He knew exactly how to alienate players, waste money on terrible design choices, and create unplayable garbage. The system flashed a red warning box containing the ironclad operational restrictions for his new venture. He could not simply burn the money, transfer it to friends, or buy luxury goods for himself using the system funds. Every single dollar had to be spent on legitimate business expenses, production costs, and employees' salaries within a real industry. Pei laughed aloud at these rules, knowing that hiring incompetent people and overpaying them was a classic corporate specialty. Furthermore, he had to release a real, functional product to the public and market it honestly without sabotaging the servers. He decided immediately to target the gaming industry, a sector where massive budgets could disappear into thin air overnight. To maximize his losses, he needed to create a game so fundamentally boring and overpriced that absolutely nobody would ever buy it. If he spent the entire startup fund on high production assets but paired them with awful mechanics, the financial loss would be absolute perfection. The system chimed once more, indicating that the first official business registration period had officially begun. Pei grabbed his old student ID card from the desk, a wave of profound confidence washing over his entire body. He was no longer a corporate slave destined to die at a desk. He was about to become the world's worst, wealthiest businessman. He needed to find an amateur team immediately, specifically individuals who possessed absolutely zero talent for making successful video games. Suddenly, a terrifyingly loud scream of rage echoed from his own dorm room, followed by the sound of a plastic keyboard slamming violently against a desk. Pei froze in the dimly lit hallway as another deafening crash rattled the cheap wooden frame of his old dorm door. He pushed the door open to find a scene of absolute digital chaos unfolding inside the cramped, messy room. His roommate Yang was furiously slamming his mechanical keyboard while staring at a pixelated defeat screen with pure rage. Watching this display of terrible gaming skills, a brilliant, counterintuitive idea began to bloom in Pei's mind. If he wanted to create a video game that would lose money instantly, Yang was absolutely the perfect lead designer. Yang spun around in his gaming chair, his eyes wide with manic energy as he noticed his returned roommate. Pei casually tossed a thick stack of printed business documents directly onto the cluttered desk. Yang blinked stupidly at the sudden influx of corporate paperwork sitting amidst his gaming gear. Pei explained that he was starting an independent gaming studio and wanted Yang to head the core design. Yang scoffed loudly, stating that he only knew how to play games badly, not how to engineer them from scratch. "That is exactly why you are uniquely qualified for the position," Pei responded with a beaming, sinister smile. He revealed a bank account statement showing a massive startup fund that he needed to invest immediately. Yang's jaw literally dropped to the floor when he counted the zeros glowing on the digital display. With his first partner secured, Pei knew he still needed an artist who could deliver truly unappealing visuals. He navigated his way to the deepest, darkest corner of the university's fine arts department building. There he found Jin, a notoriously eccentric student who specialized exclusively in dark, abstract, and depressing oil paintings. Her current masterpiece looked like a confused blend of cosmic horror and deeply depressing corporate geometric shapes. Pei smiled warmly, recognizing that this bizarre art style would completely alienate any mainstream consumer base. He offered her a massive premium salary to become the lead visual director for a new card game project. Jin stopped her brush mid-air, looking at Pei with deep suspicion because mainstream commercial projects usually hated her style. "I don't want you to change a single thing about your dark vision," Pei assured her with absolute, unwavering sincerity. With both unconventional teammates signed on, the newly formed studio gathered in the dorm room to brainstorm. Pei officially announced that their debut title would be a tactical card game titled The Phantom General. To ensure total commercial failure, Pei laid out several incredibly frustrating core design requirements. He mandated that each match must last a minimum of 3 hours, and require complex mathematical calculations for every turn. Yang raised his hand slowly, pointing out that casual mobile gamers hated long matches and intense mental math. Pei suppressed a joyful laugh, silently celebrating because that was exactly the reaction he was praying for. Next, he instructed Jin to make the user interface as unreadable, ancient, and bleak as humanly possible. Jin's eyes lit up with a terrifying artistic passion as she began sketching a layout that resembled a Gothic tombstone. To completely seal the game's doom, Pei decided to implement the ultimate barrier to entry for consumers. He declared that the digital card game would have a ridiculously high, completely overpriced entry fee of $50. Yang almost choked on his drink, yelling that free-to-play was the absolute industry standard for indie card games. Pei smoothly dismissed the concern, claiming that a premium price tag would make their game feel exclusive and elite. In reality, he knew that nobody in their right mind would ever pay that much for an untested indie game. Over the next 3 weeks, the bizarre trio worked tirelessly to bring this counterintuitive monster to life. Yang successfully programmed an absurdly complicated rule set filled with endless status effects and penalties. Jin delivered card illustrations that featured agonizingly grim phantoms, melting armor, and confusing abstract geometric voids. Looking at the final prototype, Pei was absolutely ecstatic because the game was a literal nightmare to play. He officially submitted the game to the digital store and hit the launch button, preparing to watch the financial disaster unfold. Suddenly, his smartphone vibrated violently in his pocket, announcing a massive influx of system notifications. Instead of zero sales, the digital storefront dashboard began refreshing with a terrifyingly rapid, explosive upward surge. "What on earth is happening?" Pei gasped out loud as the system began chiming a chaotic chorus of error bells. The digital numbers on Pei's smartphone screen continued to spin wildly as the viral sales metrics soared beyond all comprehension. Every single error bell from the Ritchie system felt like a direct hammer blow to his dreams of personal retirement wealth. The Phantom General card game had become a massive overnight sensation instead of the legendary flop he had meticulously planned. He realized immediately that he needed to scale up his expenses drastically to burn through this sudden massive wall of profit. Pei quickly opened a luxury real estate portal on his computer, searching for the most overpriced office space available in the metropolitan area. Within 2 hours, he stood in the center of an empty penthouse office floor overlooking the entire glittering city skyline. The monthly rent for this premium location was astronomically high, which filled his heart with absolute financial joy. Yang walked into the sparkling new headquarters, while dragging his feet, completely dazed by the sheer opulence of the environment. Jin followed closely behind him, her eyes tracking the minimalist architecture as if evaluating an elite contemporary art gallery. Pei called his small team to order around a massive mahogany conference table that cost more than their entire college tuition. He announced that their next grand venture would be a highly ambitious first-person shooter tentatively titled Project Oil Rig. Yang's eyes instantly lit up at the prospect of building a competitive tactical shooter game from scratch. However, Pei secretly smiled because he had already devised a list of terrible mechanics guaranteed to ruin the gameplay experience. Pei demanded that the player characters must move at an agonizingly slow realistic walking pace with no option to sprint. Yang looked up in absolute horror, protesting that sluggish movement would completely destroy the pacing of a modern tactical shooter. Pei smoothly countered that extreme realism required players to feel the heavy weight of full military tactical gear. Next, he insisted that weapons must have an incredibly exaggerated, highly random recoil pattern that flew completely off the screen. Yang scratched his head in absolute bewilderment, struggling to comprehend how any player could enjoy hitting nothing at all. Jin noted down the concept enthusiastically, declaring that an uncontrollable perspective perfectly simulated the chaotic existential dread of actual warfare. Pei nodded approvingly at Jin's artistic misinterpretation, thrilled that his sabotage plan was working flawlessly so far. To ensure absolute disaster, Pei ordered that every single weapon reload animation must take at least 15 seconds to complete. Yang groaned loudly, burying his face entirely in his hands as he envisioned the utter frustration of the gaming community. Pei then authorized an absurdly massive budget for ultra-high-end sound engineering, renting out professional firing ranges for maximum audio realism. Over the next 3 weeks, the team worked tirelessly inside their luxurious penthouse office to construct this unplayable digital monstrosity. Pei walked through the office daily, overjoyed to watch hundreds of thousands of dollars melt away into obscure development costs. He made sure to purchase the most expensive, over-engineered game engine license to inflate their development overhead to its absolute legal limit. The system interface would occasionally materialize to show his projected personal compensation tracking steadily upward with every financial loss. Eventually, the day arrived for the very first internal alpha test of Project Oil Rig's core gameplay loop. Yang booted up the build, his digital soldier immediately groaning under the simulated weight of 90 pounds of tactical gear. The character moved at a glacial pace across a massive rust-covered industrial oil platform that seemed to stretch into infinity. When Yang finally spotted an enemy drone and clicked the mouse, his rifle kicked violently straight up toward the virtual sky. The screen view remained stuck facing the gray clouds as the elaborate 15-second manual reload animation slowly triggered. Pei could barely contain his absolute rapture, realizing that this was undeniably the most boring, unplayable game ever conceived in human history. He immediately instructed the team to publish the raw alpha build directly onto the largest global digital distribution store without any changes. Yang warned him that releasing such an aggressively frustrating build would permanently destroy their brand new company reputation. Pei calmly replied that true innovators must never care about the fragile feelings of casual mainstream gamers. The build went live to the public at midnight, and Pei went to sleep completely convinced that total financial bankruptcy was finally secured. Early the next morning, he was violently awoken by his phone vibrating aggressively against his modern bedside nightstand. He answered the call to hear Yang screaming incoherently about a massive, unexpected surge in concurrent online players. A legendary hardcore tactical gaming community had discovered the project and was praising it across social media as an elite, ultra-realistic masterpiece. Hardcore simulation streamers were actively celebrating the agonizing 15-second reload as a revolutionary design choice that punished reckless playstyles. "What on earth is happening?" Pei gasped out loud as the system began chiming a chaotic chorus of massive incoming wire transfer alerts. "What on earth is happening?" Pei gasped out loud as the system began chiming a chaotic chorus of massive incoming wire transfer alerts. The glowing holographic interface of the Ritchie system flickered rapidly before his eyes, displaying numbers that kept rising exponentially. He realized with absolute dread that Project Oil Rig had completely broken the internet gaming charts instead of tanking as intended. If he could not find a way to lose this massive surge of capital before the final financial cycle deadline, his conversion window would close forever. Gathering his core team immediately, he declared that they were abandoning all high-budget visual elements for their next project. Yang scratched his messy brown hair in utter bewilderment, adjusting his thick glasses as he looked at the completely empty design brief. Jin adjusted her round artistic glasses, leaning forward with deep curiosity about this radical shift away from commercial graphics. Pei firmly announced that their next title would be called Game Producer, an entirely text-based game devoid of any actual gameplay mechanics. He explained that players would simply read walls of text about corporate monotony and make meaningless choices that always led to sudden termination. To ensure absolute financial disaster, he micromanaged every single line of text, demanding the prose be as boring and philosophical as possible. He forced Jin to use a stark, depressing monochrome interface that looked like an outdated corporate MS-DOS command prompt. Rather than being discouraged, Jin found this minimalist restriction to be an incredibly profound critique of consumer culture. Pei spent millions of dollars renting premium servers and launching unskippable advertisements across every major social media platform to maximize expenses. He then secretly contacted critic Zenith, the most brutal and cynical game reviewer on the internet, offering him a secret payment to completely obliterate the game. Critic Zenith sat in his high-end studio, adjusting his tailored suit collar while sneering at the strange proposal on his screen. The critic accepted the challenge, fully intending to tear this text-based abomination apart during a highly anticipated live broadcast. On launch night, Pei sat comfortably in his office chair, eagerly anticipating the total destruction of his corporate funds. Zenith started his live stream, loading up Game Producer before tens of thousands of concurrent viewers who filled the chat with mocking emojis. As the critic clicked through the agonizingly slow narrative choices, a strange, heavy silence descended upon his noisy chat room. The stark description of an employee working endlessly for an ungrateful boss began to resonate deeply with every single viewer in the stream. Zenith felt a tear welling up in his eye as the game perfectly mirrored the existential dread of modern professional life. Suddenly, Zenith slammed his hand on the desk and proclaimed to his audience that this was not a game, but a profound piece of avant-garde interactive art. Pei jumped out of his chair in pure horror as he watched the live stream review completely flip into a glowing endorsement. Within hours, internet forums exploded with deep philosophical analyses dissecting the intentional brilliance of the monochrome design choice. Mainstream tech columnists declared Game Producer to be the definitive cultural statement of the modern corporate era. The massive wave of downloads caused the paid premium servers to struggle, driving millions more in unexpected microtransaction revenue into his corporate account. He collapsed onto his office sofa, realizing that his grand master plan to lose money had once again resulted in unparalleled critical and financial success. The Ritchie system interface suddenly appeared before him, glowing with a serene, bright golden aura that filled the entire executive room. A mechanical yet strangely warm voice echoed in his mind, announcing that the final conversion cycle deadline had officially been reached. Pei closed his eyes tightly, bracing himself for the system's ultimate judgment regarding his accumulated corporate wealth. To his absolute shock, the system declared that his reverse marketing strategies had triggered a hidden algorithmic paradox within the core code. Because he had legally spent maximum funds with the absolute intent of commercial failure, the system classified his actions as perfect rule adherence. The system announced that it was converting all unintended commercial profits into permanent, tax-free personal wealth as a grand achievement bonus. A deep sense of peace washed over him as he realized he was finally, completely free from the grueling cycle of corporate slavery. The glowing holographic screen slowly dissolved into thin air, leaving behind only a quiet, beautiful modern office room. The next morning, Pei officially transferred full ownership of the thriving gaming studio over to Yang and Jin as a permanent gift. Yang leaped into the air with joy, clutching the corporate seal while screaming about the absolute creative freedom they now possessed. Jin smiled warmly at Pei, thanking him for believing in their unconventional artistic visions when no one else would. Pei walked out of the corporate building with his hands in his pockets, feeling the cool morning breeze against his face. With an endless bank account and a brilliant future ahead, he smiled knowing that failing his way to the top was the best success he could have ever asked for.